Hello. Well, I've looked across the internet today and it's kind of a slow news day. So apparently I'll have to wait till Monday for anything to crop up. But instead of going through what's going on politically or geopolitically or any of that, I thought I'd let you know about another one of my interests that I've been doing. Well, I've been doing it for about 2.5 years. Although it may not look like it, I'm a bit of a writer. Now, with one of my degrees from college was in history, so most of my most of my writing is historically based. I guess you'd call it historical fiction, and I've written probably about 35 different um, pieces. I've done I've done kind of autobiographical. I've done a couple of them. Uh, I did do one science fiction short story, and but most of them have been historical fiction. Everything from the um, 7 Years' War, or what we in the States call the French and Indian War. One took place there, and I've covered just about every conflict the U.S. has been in. I just recently wrote one on Vietnam. They're all short stories, but I'm trying to compile a bunch of them into one volume and try and make a book out of it. I'm currently writing one on takes place during the Korean War, but I wouldn't say a passion, but it's a fun, it's an escape. It's a something to keep my mind occupied, a lot like this is. But if you want to see some of my writing, you can find it on a small website called booksy.com. And I write under the name J.D. Anderson. Um, the J, the D, and the A are all capitalized, and there's periods in between it. It seems to be case sensitive for some reason. But another way to find me is just Google J.D. Anderson / Booksy. I've had I'm writing the 17th short story that are all 17 have the same main character in it. It's a little boy named Bobby, and I'm those are the ones I'm putting together to make into one larger book. And it's based a lot on my childhood. When I grew up, my father owned about 25 acres, and other than what our house sat on and the yard around it, it was all woods, just forest land all the way back to the river. And going down one side of it was a small creek, and it dug out what I thought was a humongous ravine, but when I see it now, it looks more like a glorified ditch. But I used to go down there and I could be whoever I wanted. I could be a famous explorer. I could be a soldier. I could be, uh, uh, you name it. I could be someone, an astronaut going to another planet. I could be whatever I wanted to be. And that's the premise of the story. Bobby, you know, he goes to school and he sees, learns things in school. His favorite teacher is his history teacher, just as mine was. And, he reads about things like I did. And he goes down there and, I mean, he's been in World War One. He's been in the War of 1812. He was in the Boxer Rebellion in China. He was in the Banana Wars in the Caribbean. He's in his mind. He's been all over the place, and that's a lot of what I did when I was a kid. I used to love being out in the woods. I used to love, you know, I could be whoever I wanted to be, and so I write about that. It's I've often been told you write what you know. Well, that's what I know. Um, I started writing now. I do research behind the stories themselves. So you know, I've got everything troop movements and you know different 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 weapons. I mean, there's a big difference from the French and Indian War to Vietnam. We've weapon wise, we've come a long way, and that's all. You know, I try and be as accurate as I can, even though it is a work of fiction. I have characters that, as far as I know, never existed. I do have some characters that did exist. That's why they call it historical fiction. You do have some characters that are historical figures, and they, the characters you make up blend in with them as if they were, just a private. And I write my stories. I've on Booksy, I've had probably about 16,000 view reads. People have read them, and I've had people from everywhere from the Philippines to Turkey to Britain to Ireland to the United States, all Canada, have read my books, my stories. And if you're so inclined, you can look me up on Booksy, read my stuff, leave a comment on there, let me know what you think of it. Just like on here, if you like what I'm saying, let me know. If you have some disagreement with me, let me know that too. I always want to hear the other side of things. I often say, the old adage that history is like a coin. There's two sides to it. No, history is more like a diamond. It's got all sorts of facets. Everybody witnessed something, and they all saw it differently. And I'm open to that. And if they can prove that something I saw wasn't what it was, that's that's fine. If I saw something differently than they did, I'll definitely voice that. Um, we we aren't gonna we ain't gonna solve our differences by getting mad at each other and shutting each other up. We got to, that's the art of debate. You listen to what the other person has to say, and then you give your viewpoint on what they say. That's debate, not standing over there screaming at each other and trying to drown each other out. Nothing gets solved that way. That's one of the saddest things in our culture these days, is that we've lost the art of debate. There's a lot of arts that we've lost. Debate is one of them, and we'll never dig ourselves out of this hole, and if we're screaming at each other all the time. But I've written on. Well, I was in Desert Storm, so I wrote a short story about my experiences in Desert Storm. I've written some poetry. I lost a fiance a while back to cancer, and I wrote a poem based on her. I have a fiance now, and I wrote a poem about her. I've written some poems about being a veteran. I wrote a short story about an astronaut that goes to another planet and what he encounters there. Things that come to my mind. But if you're ever find yourself in a position where you want something good to read, or take a look at what I've written. Leave a like, leave a comment, whatever you do. I'd like more people to leave comments here. Tell me what you think, what you agree with, what you don't agree with, what how you see the world. We all have our personalities and preferences. Well, share them. They do you no good keeping them to yourself. I'm not real big into just putting out insulting me and then walk away. I've had that happen too, where the only thing they put down for a comment is "you suck," and then nothing else. Well, okay, why do I suck? Why? What was it about what I wrote or what I said that you disagreed with? If you're going to make a statement like that, back it up. If I read something or hear something, I usually try and give where I heard it from, but the context that I'm getting it from. Then hopefully in the future I'll be better at that. I basically put where I heard it. But anyway, suppose I could tell you a little bit of where I'm coming from. Like I said, I grew up in the North Woods of Minnesota. I was born in a town about 20 miles south of Canada. And then I grew up in a small town about 20 miles south of that. So I was about 40 miles from Canada. And I grew up. Lumber industry was what ran the town. And when I was about 11 years old, we moved 180 miles northwest to a small town up there. They were about 5 miles from Canada. So I had people that went to school with me who were, we used to call them imports. And they basically grew up in Canada, lived in Canada, but they went to school in Minnesota. And some of it was because it was, convenient, and some of it was just because they wanted to get into a hockey program. The town I grew up in had a large hockey program, a very good hockey program, and they would go to that school so they could take part in that hockey program. Um, that being said, hockey was a big thing when I was growing up. I never played it, at least not collegiately. I didn't play on the school team or anything like that. My brother did, but I was in football. Um, I moved there. I hadn't been on skates, from birth, so I didn't really know how to skate all that well. I learned after I moved to Warroad, but nowhere near what these other guys, the other guys I went to school with, did. Most of them, they were on skates before they could walk. Um, so hockey and sports were big in my youth. Um, Hunting and fishing. I mean, that it wasn't just a pastime; it was a way of life. I mean, for quite a few years, the nearest grocery store was over 20 miles away. We had what today you'd call a convenience store, but back then we called it a general store. And you know, if you wanted to get good fresh produce, you had to go that 20 miles to get it. Well, instead of driving like that, we planted our garden and we hunted and fished. And that's what I grew up on, was, venison and walleye. And then what vegetables we grew and what berries we picked. Um, we were surrounded by nothing but trees. It was my memory of my childhood was very simple, very very. I don't really want to say the word quaint, but I had I felt I had a good childhood. Um, I had a grandmother who was a teacher, so you know a big thing that she did was every year the school would throw out old textbooks. Well, she'd put the old textbooks in a big box, and at Christmas time, that was my Christmas present. And I'd get history books, I'd get geography books, I'd get um, most history and geography. In fact, you know, one thing that's said about joining the military, you go to places you've never heard of before. Well, 9 times out of 10, places that I went to when I was in the military, I'd already heard of. And I usually knew a little bit about their history. But my grandmother taught me to read when I was 4 years old. I was reading. And I've been a reader ever since. And that kind of blended right into writing. I enjoy writing. I enjoy using words to convey my thoughts. And but that's a little bit about me. Uh, I moved to Warroad when I was 11, and we had a, a window factory up there. And from after I graduated from there, I went straight into the Marine Corps, and you know, spent 3.5 years in Japan. Um, I enjoyed it. I joke a lot saying, yeah, it was a great job until they started shooting at me, which is kind of tongue in cheek, but you know, truth is truth. Uh, was in Japan for 3.5 years, and then I went to North Carolina, and I was there for about 3 years, 3.5 years, and went on a what was called a Marine Expeditionary Unit that we went around the Mediterranean. Um, Went to Norway, and I was above the Arctic Circle for 30 days in Norway. So I've seen, and Okinawa, where I was stationed, was, you know, a tropical island. So, I've been, and Desert Storm, we were in the desert. And I've been just about every, like they say in the Marine Corps, every climbing place. Um, I've been around. My points of view aren't just something I think of off the top of my head. Well, I'll be 59 this year, so it's taken about 59 years to shape them. Um, Obviously, I'm very, very much a Second Amendment advocate. Um, very much believe in the First Amendment, and I'm more of a libertarian. I believe that we should live by the laws set by the Constitution. That's the beginning. Any other rights and freedoms not mentioned in the Constitution are delegated to the states. That's just the form of government, and it's proven good for 250 years. So I, there's always going to come a time where they're going to want to change it, but they made it rather difficult to change it, and this is for a reason, so that we don't end up with, you know, just superfluous changes, just because, somebody had a bad hair day. There's a reason why it's difficult to change the Constitution. It should be that difficult. You're talking about the law of the land. You shouldn't just be able to snap your fingers and have everything change. That's They didn't fight and die for our rights and freedoms for somebody to just think that his neighbor shouldn't have that right and be able to change it because we think. They wanted us to go through a process. They wanted us to think about it before we did it. But even that isn't, foolproof. You know, you look at prohibition. They tried to ban alcohol. Well, alcohol was, something that grew out of our and was ingrained in, and it's hard to ban a product. And that's basically what it is. Now, if people are not strong enough in the mind, where if they have a problem with that product, they just don't use it. But people aren't like that. They thought if we ban the product, all the problems will be solved. Well, they weren't. Because if somebody wanted that product bad enough, they'd go and make it themselves. That's the same thing with the Second Amendment, with guns. They want to ban guns. Well, if somebody wants to kill somebody, they're gonna find a way to do it. You don't ban the tool. The tool is used for something other than that. You use it to feed your family. You use it to protect your family. You use it to protect your rights, your property. That's what that tool is meant for. To just walk up and shoot somebody because they don't agree with you, that's not what it was meant for. So the problem is not with the tool. The problem is with the person. Same thing with drinking. The problem is not with the item, because I can sit here and have a beer and have no problem. I could mix myself a drink right now and drink it, and there'd be no problem. It's the people that don't know how to handle it, and they go out and get in their car and drive down the road and run somebody over. Or, get in a car accident, or somebody dies. Then you got to have the laws to say, well, you killed this person, whether you meant to or not, whether you were drinking or not, you killed that person. There has to be a price for it. Enforce our laws, but don't ban a tool because you don't see a need for it. Somebody else may. Well, I've been on here for 28 minutes. I didn't think I'd last this long, actually, as slow as it was today. But like I said, if you like what you hear, like my point of view, give me a thumbs up. If you have an issue with something I said, give me a comment. Let me know what you think. If you want to read some of what I've written, go to Booksy.com, and it's all right there, all 37 pieces that I've written. I'd like a comment. I'd love a comment on those too. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you agree, if you don't agree, if there's something you don't understand, that's fine. But I really would like your feedback. But my time is running out here, so I'll wish you a good day, and Semper Fi.